I'm Resident of Colwood for YouTube, and joining me tonight is Patrick McCray. Our Dark Shadows Daybook. We are here to discuss the Leviathan Arc. How are you, man?
I am I am better than Steve Austin at
Nice.
this moment. Not the Stone Cold one, but the Lee Majors one with the and all of that. Yeah, yeah. I wish my eye were just a giant like lens that you could look through the back of my head through and be bionic. But we can't do that. So
No,
I'm here and I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing good, man. I'm doing good. I can't complain. Um, so the Leviathan Arc. What a concept this is. Snake people from underneath the ground.
Yeah.
And is this the biggest, boldest concept for Dark Shadows?
Well, no, it's no Buzz Hackett, but it and it bears some resemblance because he was the first Hepcat on the show. Uh, yeah, biggest in what sense? I mean, it certainly it has the most world shaking implications.
Right.
That everything else just kind of has to do with the Collinses, and this just kind of happens to be happening around Collinsport, but has giant Bond villain like implications.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Maybe I should have specified a little more too with that word, like biggest and boldest. When I mean like biggest and boldest, when they say snake people from underneath the ground, serpent like that can take human form, I'm thinking, man, these people just have been around for so long, and if they're sort of messing with the Collins family, it sort of makes you think, who else have they messed with in a power
Oh yeah.
situation?
This is sort of big trilateral commission, crazy, QAnon conspiracy level weirdness. So yeah, these guys are everywhere, and it's funny because it's if you're watching Dark Shadows with a newcomer, it's very hard to define what is a Leviathan
Right.
because you got Oberon and Haza running around, and maybe there are more of them,
Mm.
and then you have the human cult level,
Right.
and then you have Jeb, and it makes me feel like I'm trying to describe the Zindi in season 3 of Enterprise. It's like, well, it's all these different, but they're all kind of Leviathan. Oh, never mind. Bad guys, Leviathans, just go with it.
Right. I think the other time I think, in my opinion, we see the Leviathans is in the movie Mandy that stars Nicolas Cage,
Oh,
where
yeah,
those
yeah, yeah. I mean, it is the attempt to bring in this entire context, this cult-like context, and I have a big sort of master theory of Dark Shadows, a unified field theory that I played around with. Wallace even made a really interesting poster of uh, involving the Leviathan. I don't know if you want me to get into that yet. That's a big kahuna thing because I've tried to tie it all together. Because in some ways it's a little bit of a non sequitur.
you
It does
can get into it.
it happens and then it stops.
Yeah.
So maybe there's more. Why is this happening in and around Collinwood? Why is this happening in and around Collinsport? What is this, altar, this portal? How many other things can it explain and talk about?
You mentioned to me once before that what if Joshua was a Leviathan?
Yeah, yeah, or at least being duped by them or something like that.
Yeah.
If Because that explains why is there this new house?
Right.
Why is there this new house with this really weird room that is able to tear through dimensions and tear through time,
Yeah.
um, and seemingly be unscathed by certain types of disasters? Uh, yeah. So, well, I guess that does. Do you want me to talk about my unified field theory?
Sure.
Okay. So, my unified field theory, if I recall it properly, is something like this, and I'm sure I'll get things wrong. but that the Leviathans have essentially a hellgate or something that's always been in that section of Collinsport. And maybe Joshua's known about this back in England, and maybe Isaac knew about this back in England, and Amadeus knew about this back in England, and that's why they came to this specific godforsaken spot. I don't know a lot about history or nautical jazz or so on, but this was a very obscure spot to build a shipbuilding firm in, when you've got, all of the 13 colonies that have been established and do have things like roads and according to Donald Trump, airports and things like that can get you to it and get supplies there and so on that are already kind of pre-established. So you go into the wilderness where I guess the rent is cheap. But what if they knew of this? What if the Vikings knew of this? And so that's why they chose this area. And what if the altar was always there? Yeah. And what if that's why they got there? And so what Joshua was charged with doing was essentially building a more stable focusing chamber for the eventual herald of the Leviathans, Jeb, to use as essentially a base to take the energy from the altar and trap it and focus it and use it as a means of travel, as a means of conquering other dimensions, conquering other times. And the fact is that it's just a ship without a rudder. And, Judah Zachary knows of this and wants to try and focus it and use it even in death. And, we see where that gets him. But, Jeb never matures to the point that let's imagine that if Jeb hadn't fallen in love with Carolyn, or if Jeb had fallen in love with Carolyn and had a child with her,
right, that
actually would have been the being to bring balance to the force or whatever. That would have been the real Kwisatz Haderach of all of this. And that imagine that becomes the transformation room for that child. And that there is one further stage that was meant to happen. But of course, Jeb rebels, and Jeb doesn't even find out about that. It could be that Oberon and Hazen never gave Nicholas Blair that memo because they really couldn't trust him.
Right.
Because God only knows what Nicholas Blair would have done with that room had he known how to operate it. I'm convinced that there is a way to operate that room, like there's a way to operate the time staircase. But the presence of that room without a controller at any point in time, because once you have a controller at some point in the time stream, they stabilize it going in all directions. So all of the temporal weirdness that had gone on in Collinwood would have stopped had there been a controller in there, someone who, knew how to operate the room. But there isn't, which explains all of the chaos. It's like a boat without a rudder. And so that explains why everything weird is happening in Collinsport, especially at Collinwood, and they just finally stumble across it. So that's my wacky theory.
Can I add to your theory?
Please do, because it's nonsense. It's fiction. So add as much as you want. Yeah, it's BS. Yes, please.
Okay, so the Leviathans can take human form, right?
Sure.
So they love to have influence over powerful people. That's what I took away most.
Yeah.
from the Ark. So what if the Collins family had connection to the king and they had money, so it would make sense that they would have connections to the royal family or an associate of the royal family. And what if a member of the Leviathan whispers in the king's ear, send them here, send one of them here,
Sure.
and the king says, go here, or basically just like you said, talks to Amadeus or Isaac themselves, and like if you go here, you'll find land. It wouldn't be far fetched, and they don't know their maybe they don't know their Leviathan. They don't know because I feel the Leviathan how they recruit is by giving power to those who want it, who
Sure.
really, sort of, what's his name, who marries Angelique?
Sky
Well,
Rumson.
right. Sky wanted power. He wanted money. They gave it to him. So if they can find someone who wants needful things or greed, they're
Yeah.
going to exploit that person and recruit them into their cult.
Well, yeah, because I think, for the Leviathans, the sort of things those mortals want is small potatoes.
Right.
Oh, guy, you want a magazine? Sure. Yeah, have a magazine. And now we have a propaganda arm.
Right.
Because do we ever find out what Sky Rumson's magazine is?
I don't think so.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to know. I don't think it's Cat Fancy.
I don't think it is either.
I don't think
But
it's Cat Fancy.
he's always successful in business. Well,
Sure.
he's successful because they're allowing him to be successful because they've given him everything he's ever wanted. Angelique was just icing on the cake for him.
Well, and she of course has no idea. They don't give. That's interesting because they don't provide Angelique.
Right.
That's just a whack. I wonder if she was able to keep in the closet to the extent that they had no idea who
Right.
she was. I mean, coincidences happen. That's why we have the word coincidence.
Right.
But I'm sure they would not have let that stand because, basically you've got the student of Judah Zachary.
Yeah.
And we can imagine that if Judah knew anything about this, he would have tried to do something about it. And maybe he did. And maybe that's why the Bedford trials happened just in time. And Amadeus made sure to, get rid of him.
Right.
Oh my God. Wait a minute, Jewel. Do you realize what this means? Judah Zachary may be the good guy.
They may be.
He may have been trying to stop the Leviathans or seize power from the Leviathans the entire time. And that's why he was taken out.
Yeah.
And that's why he's trying to destroy the Collins family, is to stop them from ushering in the new Leviathan age.
If we could see, because here's what I believe. I think every member, like true recruited member that is faithful to the Leviathan, has like a snake tattoo on their wrist.
Sure.
If we could see Amadeus's wrist.
What episode would that be in?
If we
Yeah.
could, I think there's Collinses that have been recruited, like Isaac, Amadeus. Why not? And Barnabas is none the wiser to any of this.
Well, but it's one of the reasons why Barnabas is chosen as the it's the family business.
Right.
Wow.
Barnabas to me is sort of Joshua's setting Barnabas up to be the heir apparent. He's the sort of the next in line to help the Leviathan. But Angelique comes along and messes that all up.
Okay, I'll put a spin on that.
Okay.
What if Joshua, was engineering all this? What if it's Jeremiah? Jeremiah seems like a much much cooler head. He, you know, he doesn't panic too much by mysterious tattoos showing up on him.
Right.
Of course, I'm sure, you know, Naomi woke up many times with strange tattoos that she didn't remember how she got, but, you know, somewhere in back of the Eagle, she lost a bet.
Right.
Girl likes to drink. So I think there was a tattoo there somewhere.
Yeah. And I did a story where Jeremiah was a member of the Leviathan.
You told me about that. Tell me about that.
Okay, so Jeremiah, and this is where I came up with the snake tattoo, had a hidden tattoo. He would wear these long sleeves, as you would see like back in 1795.
Yeah.
So he's running he's running the business. Joshua isn't. Joshua's a doctor in my story. So
Okay.
Joshua's very nice. He's not this mean, cruel man. Jeremiah is more the ruthless. He's the brother of Joshua, but he's the older brother instead of being the younger.
Oh.
So he is running the family business. He's running the fleet, and he's got control of all this money. He comes to his quarters, to his office, in walks the constable. Who pulls back his sleeve and reveals the snake tattoo. And then that's where Jeremiah unbuttons his little wrist, and you see the snake tattoo. Because he asks him, "Have you forgotten your oath?" And he shows, "No, I haven't forgotten. And my nephew will be the heir apparent. He will be the next in line when he marries. Because we will not only have Colin's money, we will have the Dupre money." And that's sort of what I was doing. But Angelique is sort of my hero in my story, in a weird way. Because when Josette dies at the hands of a gunshot, she curses the Collins family by killing herself, sort of causing the curse to happen. She sacrifices herself to cause the curse to happen, of Quentin and Barnabas, because Quentin is Jeremiah's son.
Quentin's Jeremiah's. Okay, how are you like compressing the timeline a little bit, or?
Yeah, a bit. Like my story, I admit, was weird, because what I had was Jeremiah had a wife, was married, and he literally, after his son was born, to prove himself the Leviathan, chose to kill his wife.
Well, wait, wasn't his wife Laura?
Yeah, I named her Laura in the story.
Okay. But in the quote unquote real Dark Shadows, I think he's married to Laura. Yeah. Oh, you go on.
And so I'm sorry, but he kills her when Quentin's still a baby.
Okay.
And he just says that he plays it off that she killed herself, that she didn't kill herself, that she stabbed herself in the heart, not he stabbed her.
She tripped into that noose.
Yeah, she tripped, right? That's his story. And everyone believes him because he's this nice, cool, calm man, you're saying. And until Quentin finds it out, because Quentin ends up killing the constable by accident, or killing someone by accident. I forget who, because it's been so long since I wrote it. But he kills somebody by accident, and it's a member of the Leviathan. And when the member goes missing, they're sort of that's where the constable, I think, is panicking. That's right. He's like, "Where is he? Where is he? We sort of need him." And Jeremiah's like, "No, we don't need them. We don't need them." And that's where Judah Zachary, I sort of mixed it. Judah Zachary is controlling the Leviathan in my story. He sort of appears to Jeremiah and says, "You don't keep your word, you know what happens to you." Which he means he's going to be destroyed if he doesn't. Yep. So, yeah. It's crazy. I'm sorry.
No, I like it. I like it a lot. Wow. The only thing I can think of is, when we talk about tattoos, did Andre have a tattoo?
Right.
Specifically actually a tramp stamp that said in French, "Sugar Daddy"? I want to know. Those are the answers I demand. Yeah.
Like that.
Let's see what happens next.
Right, right. What did you think of Obahan and his assistant? What did you think?
Their system? Like what do you mean?
No, his assistant, the girl, the person who was next to him.
Oberon and Haza.
Yeah,
Thought they were. You know, they're wonderfully mysterious characters. I mean, one of the most, because they revealed so little.
right.
I'm pretty convinced that Oberon shows back up in the Star Trek episode "What Are Little Girls Made Of" as Rook, who's talking about the old ones. Remember that episode with like the Kirk, identical robot that's been, because Rook looks just like Oberon. And he's talking about the old ones. So there's all this Lovecraftian stuff. I thought they were terrific. It once again, brings up a weirder fold into the cosmology of Dark Shadows, as in who's running the evil.
Right.
Because we've got Oberon and Haza. We've got Mr. Best.
Right.
Isn't that Death? Basically?
Yeah, he's deaf.
He's death. And then you got Diabolos.
Yeah.
And so how do you think these fit together?
I think the devil is behind the Leviathan.
Okay, well that makes sense because he sends Nicholas to go run the thing.
Right. But I'm sort of with you on Judah. Judah may have been the hero. He may have been.
Isn't that I've never had that thought before. Isn't that the wackiest notion? History by the victors.
Here's what's weird. Here's something I always remember with history. Usually one army lines up against the other, right? When it's a war.
Yeah.
Maybe Judah was building his own cult to wage war on the Leviathan, but he did not count on one of them betraying him. And he didn't count on the Collins as being Leviathan themselves. There's things he's good, he has magic, but he can't see everything around the corner.
That is a great theory. And why are they so vulnerable to werewolves? How do werewolves fit into the? How on earth is a werewolf their great weakness?
I would say it boils down to the Leviathan being a serpent, and they sort of use another animal to take down another. That's a weird explanation, I know.
Tabby kind of thing.
Right. It's they need a weakness. There's every villain or hero has a weakness in comics, right? So like Barnabas, who's our hero, has the stake, the silver bullets when he's the vampire. Quentin, when he's the werewolf, silver bullets. So with the villains, we need Angelique's is fire. Laura the Phoenix is if you put out the flame, the eternal flame.
Rogers is AA.
It is. That brandy will do him in.
There's a fine.
But so they decide with the Leviathan, well, werewolves is their weakness. Now, I think they added too many weaknesses later on.
Because it's like drowning, werewolves,
ghost,
the shadow puppet thing.
Yeah. I think they should have just stuck to the werewolf, and they would have been fine. That's my only. I love the Leviathan arc, other than what they did later with all these weaknesses. It's like you're having too many here.
Interesting thing with the Leviathan arc is that it also signals what I call the narrowing of Collinsport, where we start to see, other than the Todd's shop and a little bit of the blue whale at the beginning, we start to see less and less and less of Collinsport, and less and less and less of the outside world. I mean, once the sheriff gets turned into a zombie, it's like they don't get another one until 1995. Yeah. And so the police are out, and it also signals really the grand exit of Roger Collins.
Yeah.
Roger is, I think, Roger stumbles around the parallel time room a little bit with Barnabas at one point, but maybe, but really his big finale is his duking it out with Bruno, where I think doesn't he kill Bruno? And like knocks him out with a candlestick. Roger mixes it up. And then we don't see Roger anymore. And so this context that surrounded everyone for so long shrinks more and more and more until when we get back from 1995, it's Elizabeth sometimes, Stokes a little bit. Then he goes off to, London or Egypt or something. There's no Roger. We kind of deal with Sebastian Shaw a little bit and Roxanne, but very little bit. And it gives it this very bleak apocalyptic feeling. And that begins with the Leviathans, where suddenly there's something much bigger than the Collins family. And we realize, oh my God, we're alone.
Yeah.
The world's just fallen away and we're it.
You're right. It feels narrow, you know what I mean? And it feels darker too. Like for whatever reason, like during the Leviathan arc, the tone throughout is just dark.
To have poor Barnabas, he goes through all of this stuff, and Julia's so excited to see him, and then he's just a jerk, and it's like, it's, and I think if the Leviathan arc doesn't necessarily sit well with people all the time, it's that they really got Barnabas taken away for a while. I mean, he's being the character that you rooted on during the most successful run of the series.
Right.
And there's something very unsatisfying about that. Where did he go?
Here's what I wish. The one thing I don't mind Barnabas being sort of the heel for the Leviathan, but I wish they would have mixed one character back into the fold. And I think it would have been Victoria Winters would have made sense. They could have.
Well, okay, tell me more about that.
You have now, Paul Stoddard would have still been there. So Paul's sort of, Liz would not have turned Leviathan. I wouldn't have turned Elizabeth as a member.
Yeah.
Her and Paul Stoddard are arguing. She wants him to leave. And they're in the drawing room. And the double doors are open. You hear the door from the foyer open and shut. You don't see who comes in. And they're arguing. She goes, I just think you should leave. And before he says anything, you hear a voice say, I think Miss Elizabeth is right. And you turn and there's Alexandra.
Okay.
And she's like, Vicky. And she comes up to her, Victoria does, and you sort of see Elizabeth hug her, but she sort of gives this weak embrace back. And you hear Elizabeth say, I missed you. I missed you, Victoria. And you hear click. And Victoria goes, I missed you too, mother, and kisses her on the cheek, steps back. You see a knife in Liz, and she screams. Paul goes over, and she blames Paul.
Okay.
And Victoria is your Leviathan member.
Okay, good. Yeah, I was hoping you were going there.
Sorry.
That's what I was hoping you were going to do, is Victoria's a Leviathan. And they brought her back.
Right. Yeah. I think heels, anybody can be made into a heel. And if there's anybody who's living proof of this, it's Henry Fonda. In my favorite Western, Once Upon a Time in the West. Because Fonda did not play many heels. And that was one of his best ones ever. And if they could turn him heel, you damn sure could turn Alexandra heel. I feel the hint of Alexandra's heel, if you watch the Phoenix arc in the beginning, she says something that's sort of in a sinister tone. She says 100 years, like in a mocking way toward Laura. And it's almost sinister in tone.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
She's a New York City girl. So nothing for Carolyn Groves. Technically, she, has the throne.
Yeah.
Carolyn Groves is the Roger Moore of Victoria Winters's, with Betsy Durkin as the George Lazenby. It's a good idea. I mean, Vicky, they kept, Alexandra kept saying, just make me a bad guy or something, and I'll come back.
Yeah.
She left the party too early.
Yeah.
I mean, she did.
She did.
She did. And as a firm Durkinite, which is on my driver's license, big Betsy Durkin fan. I'll deal with Alexander coming back if I have to.
Right.
But I was watching Carolyn Groves this morning. I mean, not from afar or something with a very powerful lens. I mean, I was watching her, on the, like, episode 665 or something.
I don't think either Betsy or Carolyn did a bad job being Victoria. There's just, I don't know. Again, my favorite character is Victoria Winters, so there's something about Alexandra that just stands out.
I like Istvan.
Right.
That's my favorite character. That's the one I'll take. But I don't know how Betsy Durkin would have been as Istvan.
What did you think of? We talked about them having all these. The Leviathan had all these weaknesses. They had the werewolf, the ghost. What did you think of them having a bunch of weaknesses?
It was a good. I mean, it was a storytelling necessity after a while, because the story was up, and they had to get rid of them. It was a werewolf thing for a while, but honestly, it's kind of silly.
Yeah.
Lock them in a room with Chris Jennings and see what happens. That has all sorts of implications. So that's not really good. They had to get rid of the character, and normally, when it's time to get rid of a character, Barnabas comes to his senses and strangles them or something.
Yeah.
But in this case, I mean, let's face it, it makes no sense.
Right.
Let's be honest. We can love Dark Shadows and say, to have these ancient godlike creatures that pre-exist time and space and can turn into big monsters and stuff like that, that they're going to be frightened by a man wolf is, because when Jeb transforms,
Right.
he still keeps his faculties.
Yeah.
But the werewolf doesn't.
Right.
So I don't want to say it was silly, but it is kind of an example of, I feel like, and I really, Jewel, I got to tell you, I hate saying anything critical about Dark Shadows.
Right.
Really, so know that the stuff I'm going to say is not a pleasure. I'm not one of these guys who sits around, going, oh, there's a blooper or whatever.
I know.
People are assholes. Sorry. But I think that they came up with a big idea and didn't fly. They had to change Barnabas and come up with the Josette. Oh, I was doing it to save Josette's ghost or something, something like that, which was fine. I didn't mind that. But then it's like, well, maybe parallel time will work, and we gotta wrap this thing up.
Right.
So let's do that.
If they, I think overall, it's a big, bold idea, and I love the idea and the concept. It's a hell of a concept. I just feel the most trouble they had was hanging on to it. It felt like they had two hands and and a bunch of juggling ball. They're juggling here,
Yeah.
And
Well,
go ahead, sorry.
no, I was gonna, did God bless him, he's my favorite writer, but did Sam Hall create a story so big he couldn't lift it?
Right.
With the sort of budget and restraints and everything else. And, it reminds me a little bit of Dr. Faustus by Christopher Marlowe in this sense. In Dr. Faustus, you got a guy who sells his soul to the devil for ultimate knowledge. And he realizes that ultimate knowledge isn't that fulfilling.
Right.
In a weird way, it's like, okay, I know what an atom looks like from the inside out, and so on and so forth. But okay, and so you design this huge world-ending story, and at a certain point, either the world ends or it doesn't.
Right.
And when it doesn't, Lucy, you got some splaining to do.
Yeah.
Because they're not so powerful, and they never did sort of circle back to the origin of the Leviathans and to their essence, and have Oberon and Hayes show back up and say, okay, that didn't work. David, how about you? You might be a good avatar for us.
Yeah.
I think that's what happened. You have this wonderful wind up, and also I don't think they knew yet quite what to do with Christopher Pennock.
Yeah.
Because I think they must have realized that they had a brilliant actor, a brilliant, funny, intellectual, versatile giant of a man in every sense. I will never run out of good things to say about the late Chris Pennock. He's a great guy, and I think part of it is that it's like we've written a part too small for him, so maybe we'll move on, and he can play two parts.
Yeah.
And yeah.
If they end up ever thinking about bringing this back, like during the new series, like if they try to go for like Judah Zachary and the Leviathan,
Yeah.
I think a great way to do it, have in the trailer, have these people standing on a stone, like maybe at the head at the Stonehenge even, have them all in robes, and they have a snake there, and that's the representation of the Leviathan. And you have this person pull back the hood, and it's Laura Parker, but it's not Angelique.
Sign me up.
And she lifts the machete and she says, "We sacrifice this member of the Leviathan because the snake's the representation of it to bring you back, Judah." And the head goes off and Judah comes back.
Oh yeah, that's marvelous.
You
I love.
know, I would love for them to. I hope they attempt something to that effect. Don't be afraid to mix it up and have this too big baddie, or pick a side. If Judah's really good, great. If he's was against the Leviathan the whole time, he has other cult members. Here they are gathering, bringing him back.
I think it's a great idea. I love it.
Thank you. What did you think of? I did love the special effects during the Leviathan arc. They used the werewolf. I love the lighting. It's a dark mood. What did you think of that?
The show never ceases to be ambitious with its visual life, and they do evolve with that. Yeah, I think it's terrific. I think it's you got some of their best special effects undercut by that shadow ghost, which is their not best special effect. So it's almost like a law of conservation of good special effects. You know, they can only have so many, and so they put them here, and then, you know, Leela Swift goes, Dan, you want me to do what? Okay. Okay, I got some. Hey, Hennessy, can I see some of your construction paper? Dan, hold on. Yeah, it's a mixed bag, but there's some great stuff in there. What is your favorite part of that visual life?
My favorite effect during the Leviathan arc, it's going to sound strange, is the breathing. During
Oh,
the creepy, it was Michael Myers before Michael Myers. Like, no offense to John Carpenter, he did not perfect creepy breathing. Dark Shadows did.
yeah.
I love the breathing during the Leviathan arc because it just, every time I watch it, it gives me chills and I love it to death for it. That's a part of the reason why I love the arc. It's like, holy shit, these are some creepy people.
You know, there's something really great about that because it's a very simple effect.
Right.
It's not even a visual effect, you know. And you know, they just asked Thayer David to not take the elevator and walk up the stairs, you know, 8 or 9 flights, and then just stuck a microphone in front of him. But sorry, it's there. Anyway, but the point is, David Ford was doing 1776. Couldn't ask him to do it. So yeah, it's elusive. And that's a really important word. It alludes to much more. And the show, I think, its best visual effects are oral, are sound oriented. I was watching for one of the many day books I didn't write. I was watching the Madam Finley stuff today,
Right.
and watching her in Quentin's room, and it's one of those episodes like with Julia and the phone where she thinks the ghost of Dave Woodard's after. I guess it's Barnabas messing with her or something. But it's all sound. You know, it's a few slamming doors and things, but for the most part, it's just that Victrola and that song, which alludes to so many things. You asked me once what my favorite piece of music on the show was. It might be Quentin's theme.
Right.
Because it can be so many things depending on what you need it to be. And so the breathing, sure. And the breathing, let's be honest, it could have sounded really silly.
Yeah.
It could have sounded like an obscene phone call, you know, and it didn't. It stopped just short of that. And the breathing also gave a sense of size, that there was something really big that's making this kind of noise. Yeah, it has a very cosmic, again, Lovecraftian feel to it.
It's that unseen terror that you can't see, you can only hear, and you can only imagine how big it could possibly be. And
It's
I
got
think,
an entire room,
right.
you know. So I mean, I imagine teeth and tentacles and
Yeah.
you know, just some great bellows like thing where maybe the lungs are in an entirely different dimension, and it's, you know, like only half of the body is here and the rest of it is, it's almost like just the head is sticking out and the rest of it's, you know, in some parallel time.
Yeah. I could see that too, because you're pulling this big idea out, and maybe it's not even in the actual your time, it's in another time. Why not? The Leviathan is such a great concept. I love it.
The challenge with the Leviathan, and they used it well in the resolution of it, but the challenge is that all of the other villains on the show were personal.
Right.
They all had some sort of personal stake, some sort of emotional stake in the characters. I guess maybe except for Nicholas Blair, but Nicholas Blair is just kind of attached to Angelique.
Right.
And so he's an extension of Angelique, and Adam is kind of an extension of Barnabas, and so on. Uh, and the Leviathans, one of the challenges they had is that it at least started out as not really being intrinsic to the Collins family or to any character or something like that. What would have been interesting is if Paul Stoddard had come back and he hadn't aged.
Yeah.
And we realized, oh, Paul is Jeb. Paul, right, the Leviathan, and Carolyn is the thing that he is trying to pull back. And that Carolyn is this chosen one. Because Nancy Barrett could do anything.
Yep.
Good God, what an actor. She could do anything you asked her to. And so that I think might have personalized the story a little bit more. But it's fun to speculate, but Monday morning quarterbacks are jerks. So I also don't want to sit here and do that, because God only knows what Sam and Gordon were having to contend with and having to deal with, and what orders Dan Curtis had given them. And one of the things I think makes the dark fantasy of Dark Shadows so unique and so rich is that it wasn't written by science fiction writers. It wasn't written by horror writers. Right. It was written by writers who then were adapting to that field.
Yeah. And they did a hell of a job. I mean,
yeah.
Sorry, go ahead. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't. Go ahead. Were you going to say something?
No, God, no. Certainly not of any merit.
Okay. When I think of Gordon Russell and Sam Hall, what they came up with, even for this, I can't even, God bless them, because it's an amazing concept. When I think of these two brilliant writers, and they had to contend with such censorship, in the 60s. I mean, I talk about censorship all the time, and I've said the hardest thing for those older shows was they were censored beyond belief.
They were, but here's a question, Joel, is that were their sensibilities so formed by those limits that they didn't even think about them?
I think at times that I'd like to think that the writers, when they wrote something, no, I'm not just meaning Gordon and Sam, I mean in general, because there were a lot of writers during that period. If you look at the 50s and the 60s, I don't think writers so much thought about censorship, but once they maybe finished something and handed it in, and maybe they got looked at like, hey, we have guidelines we have to abide by. Mm-hmm. Because I mean, God, look, Elvis Presley's hips were censored, for fuck's sake. That's how
ours.
It's just, that's how ridiculous it was. The censorship in those, was it ridiculous? Yes, it was totally ridiculous.
Yeah.
And again, it's like, that's why I feel when we get Dark Shadows now, we're going to be able to get away with some stuff they weren't able to. But is that
a good thing? Or do you think maybe those limits that they had forced them to focus on the storytelling tools that were not going to be censored, meaning character depth, relationships, things of that nature, that were not necessarily sensationalistic? There's a part of me that kind of thinks that the censored elements on Dark Shadows were helpful.
Right.
I think those limits sometimes can be very guiding and can be focusing. one of my favorite periods of horror movies is, give or take a few titles. The epicenter of it is right around 2010.
Yeah.
Where you have this real ascendancy of the PG-13 horror film. You get it starts years earlier, The Exorcism, Emily Rose, 1408, the Insidious movies, Last Exorcism. And these are all films that worked in the confines of the PG-13 rating, and are far more terrifying than the Saw films or something like that, because they're having to rely on the psychology of the characters. So, okay, let's go back to the deep breathing for a moment. I know it sounds lame on a certain level, but let's pretend it doesn't. That deep breathing and your imagination, or a bunch of CGI crap?
I'd rather have the deep breathing.
Me too.
Because, look, I don't mind CGI, but I think it gets overused too. Less is usually more. And I subscribe to that, because my favorite horror director of all time was Val Lewton.
Oh, yeah.
And Lewton did a lot with less, more than maybe any director ever. And I loved him for it. And Isle of the Damned, Cat People, just beautiful.
Body Snatcher,
right. It gave you those chills, and he let your imagination work itself. And it was beautiful. And Dark Shadows with the Leviathan Arc did the same thing. I'm with you in the sense of, yes, the censorship helped Dark Shadows. The writers had limits and they followed them, but they didn't let you think, hey, we know when to push that button, and we know when not to push it.
Yeah.
And sorry.
No, I agree. I was gonna say, when you think back to the various iterations of Dark Shadows that are not Dark Shadows, the movies, all three of them,
yeah.
The 1991 TV series. I don't know about you, because I'm hardly a prude. I'd be all for Dark Shadows directed by Russ Meyer, but all kidding aside, I think back to the moments that just don't work, that just feel kind of clunky and strange. And it's, Maggie sleeping with Roger.
Yeah.
Roger had that hat that I hated. Or just, the gore in House of Dark Shadows, that just, it wasn't very convincing, really, for me. It just was like, oh, okay, there's blood. It's I'm not feeling anything about the story. Or Julia Hoffman filleting Barnabas, or the tongue, the Angelique's tongue, and those things. And it's like, golf clap, and I'm a filthy deviant individual, and I don't like those things, and it's not because I'm a prude about Dark Shadows. It's just that Dark Shadows established a certain universe where certain things are of focus, and I think some of that honestly comes from Jonathan Frid, because Jonathan Frid was the interest that he projected in those characters. It might have been erotically interpreted by audience members, but it was not erotically projected by him. He was interested in these people on a much more metaphysical level. And I think that established a kind of baseline on the series that even the Eros of Quentin and so on was fine, but it still stayed within certain lines.
I think the writers for Dark Shadows today have to know, we've talked about the limitations, right?
Yeah.
Know what buttons to push and know what limits you have to sort of pull back on. You don't have to show a ton of blood to impress me. Leave me wondering.
Sure.
Leave me with, you don't know what's going to happen, but have my imagination where when I hear something, I don't see it, but it scares it, like, holy shit, that's scary. You
Yeah.
know, that's intimidating, or at least intimidating. What the old show did do. I'm with you on that. I don't look. Yes, I love horror, but I don't need to see a ton of blood to be impressed either.
Well, we got done a few weeks ago talking about Halloween,
Yep.
and think of how little gore
Yep.
in Halloween. There's almost none.
And that's the thing, because tomorrow night I'm doing Friday the 13th with Butch.
I can't be so happy for you guys. That's great. He's the best. Butch Rosenbaum just hangs the moon and stars.
And there's a lot of blood in that. That they showed. But what I take away most is, what scared me most was Betsy Palmer going, "Help me," in a kid's voice. That scared the shit out of me.
Mm-hmm.
That was the scariest part of that movie, was her, "Help me, help me," in a kid's voice. And it was just, it sends chills every time I watch it, that scene. But
yeah, absolutely.
Give me that over any axe to the skull.
Yeah, I mean, and that's not to say that gore is necessarily bad. I mean,
Right.
I remember when I saw Dawn of the Dead for the first time, and it was done with such verve and imagination and elan. I mean, there was almost a sense of giddiness to what he was able to get Tom Savini to do, and there was a sense of wit to it that was all about the context in which this, oh God, there goes the guy's head in the rotor of the helicopter. I thought that was going to happen. Oops. Things like that kind of were witty. They had something interesting happening there.
Right. Have you ever read George A. Romero's Resident Evil script? I'm going to send it to you. And let me tell you something. That's the best Resident Evil movie that didn't get made.
Because the Resident Evil movies that did get made were not the best Resident Evil movies that could have been made. I mean, I like it when Milla is in the thing and then gets out and is flopping around. That's fun. But I watched 2 hours of that. That great, terrific, fine. But the rest of it, I'm not a big fan.
George A. Romero should have got to make his Resident Evil movie.
He should have gotten to make a lot of movies.
Yeah. I mean, that script is amazing to read. I mean, I read that.
10 words or less. What's the best part of it?
When the portrayal, how he does the portrayal of Wesker. I can't recite the line because I haven't read it in a while. But when Wesker betrays his team,
yeah,
I imagine they're in that laboratory with the tyrant, with the creature, and I can see Wesker turning heel.
Okay.
And the visual of it when you're reading it, trust me, it's beautiful. Because I was visualizing as I was reading his script. He literally, because he's got an earpiece in, he's got this device in where if he dies, the city blows up.
Okay.
And so, again, I won't spoil it because you need to read this. It's beautiful. It's just beautiful.
Then I will.
I will send it to you. But again, I like the Leviathan Arc. I know you do too.
Yeah.
It's a great story. Like, the concept is I have no more questions for you, unfortunately.
Well, I think the biggest thing about the Leviathans, and the biggest tragedy about the Leviathans, is the biggest tragedy related to a lot of things on the show, and that is they didn't run for another 20 years, because eventually they would have brought them back and fulfilled more of that story with it. And
Right.
so I think really with the Leviathans, that's a story that's so old, that goes back so far. We don't really know if this is the end of the Leviathan story or just the middle of it.
Right.
So
Maybe the Leviathans have been around since before Christ, you know?
well, I mean, they're allegedly before the Earth was formed. I mean,
Right.
they're these pre-time things. So, yeah, I mean, but before Christ, and maybe even before Dick Clark
What if the Leviathans
didn't play. Dick Clark humor, it's not there anymore.
Oh my god.
Dick.
What if the Leviathans are from space?
Well, I think that's the implication. I mean, it was them taking a page from Lovecraft, and those creatures all
Right.
are from the far reaches of the cosmos.
They burrowed into the ground and just waited.
Mm-hmm.
And for humans, really,
Yeah.
somewhat people they could manipulate and use. Because I mean, you're not manipulating and using a dinosaur, right?
No, there's not the conversationalist you might hope.
Right. That's true.
That's the problem with the Jurassic Park movies. You can't talk to them.
No, you can't. No.
It's like the Gorn Captain. If they brought the Gorn Captain back and had him leading the dinosaurs in Jurassic Park, then you've got a movie. And this is what we haven't talked about. Okay, two great things in the Leviathan sequence. One is Humbert Allen Ostrado's expression when they smash the altar, or they smash the box in the altar, because this is a great example of Dark Shadows doing Wonder Team Action Force, where they all converge, and by all I mean like two characters, but they actually converge and stop something, and there's a scheme that they pull off, and it's always on Nicholas, and they smash it. Nicholas is in that hilarious sort of thing that was stolen from the Brady Bunch Variety Hour, that he's in sequence. He's in the sequenced gown. Go back and look. And he kind of goes, you don't know what you've done. And he does this hilarious kind of, yeah. And that made sense because Humbert Allen Ostrado got started as a stand-up comedian, which is true. When he was in the Army, he got started performing. He did stand-up comedy, which I had no idea. So he had this real sense of shtick that he never really got to play. So I love that. And the fashion and hair, because hair is important to me now, of Bruno Hess.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Just anytime he is on screen, it is so hilarious and tasteless that it circles back around and kind of becomes tasteful again. It's its own aesthetic. And I think that's just fantastic.
I actually liked his hair better in the Leviathan Arc than I did in 1897.
Well, there's more of it. It's massive. It's huge.
Yeah.
It's like Tony Clifton. Yep. It's magnificent. It's almost as magnificent as the fact that the ebook version of the Dark Shadows Daybook is now available on Apple Books and Smashwords and Nook. For the 5 owners of a Nook out there, you can now get the Dark Shadows Daybook and something called Gardeners. Who knows what that is? And the Kobo or Kodo or something. It's on all of these. It's that fantastic.
Cool. I like that.
We just got that sort of disseminated So that's going on.
I like that, man. I like that a lot. I love that.
So anyway, read ebooks. I'm waiting for you.
Is there anything you want to add about the Leviathan Arc?
There we go. No, I think it's a lot of fun. And I think it's a good, if you look at Dark Shadows as one overall story, it's a really good pause in between the rip roaring wackiness of 1897 and this very serious, sobering, apocalyptic Dark Shadows grows up kind of sequence that ends the show. So it's a necessary transition.
Yeah. I look at it, when I look at the Leviathan Arc, I look at it like this. Here's these creatures that are a huge possibility for the future of Dark Shadows because, like you said, we don't know when they began. We know they're before the Earth, but they're maybe perhaps one of the better concepts of Dark Shadows that I love. And I hope people go back and watch it and enjoy it a little more.
Well, and appreciate the fact that had the original screenplay by John August been allowed to be filmed, they would have been the primary villains of the 2012 Dark Shadows movie.
Yep, that's true. Patrick, man, I'm out of questions for you. I want to thank you for taking the time to join me.
Have me back anytime. I am more than happy to do this. Thank you so much.
Link to where you can get Patrick's book, The Dark Shadows Daybook, on Amazon is going to be in the description box. Go pick up that book if you haven't. It's
you can get it on Books, Nook, all of these places.
Yep. Go pick up this book. If you are not a Dark Shadows fan, you can pick up this book and get into Dark Shadows real quickly. It's that good.
Thank you.
And that's coming from a guy who read it. I love it.
19 hours worth. Unbelievable. You're the hero of the beach, my friend.
I'm stuffed, dude. I told my wife I was like, I'm crazy. She goes, you were always crazy.
Like Jack Warden, crazy like a fox.
That's it. Patrick, man, thank you so much for giving me your time. You are great, man.
Happy holidays.
You have a happy holidays too, man. If I don't speak to you before Christmas, which I intend to,
I hope
have a Merry Christmas. I do want to bring you back on for some more Dark Shadow stuff.
Anytime.
But you have a great night, man. Thank you, and God bless.
Take care, sir.
Bye.